In the years following the American Revolution, Yankee merchant ships fell victim to pirates from the Barbary states of North Africa. And when France and Britain went to war, both nations seized American sailors, impressing them into service on warships. In 1794, to protect Americans on the high seas, Congress voted to establish a navy, authorizing the construction of 6 frigates. One of the first completed was the USS Constitution, which rests today in Boston Harbor. The most distinguished of the tall ships of America's first navy, she became known to all as Old Ironsides. This is the story of one of her designers, a man who would play a central role in the birth of the United States Navy, Josiah Fox. Fox was born in 1763 at Falmouth, in Cornwall, in the southwest corner of England. His family traced its lineage to Sir Francis Drake, 16th century British admiral, and to George Fox, 17th century preacher who founded the Society of Friends, or Quakers. The Fox family crest is inscribed with the motto, "Faire sans dire," to do without saying. The family farms, or leasehold estates, can still be seen today. Antron, Chenoweth, Lower Spargo, and Trenoweth. The income from rental of the estates was invested, providing funds for the education and travel of the Fox children. The land itself, with its rolling hills, would influence Josiah's later decision to settle in eastern Ohio, where the terrain was similar. The Quaker religion may have influenced his choice of a profession, since at the time only those who were members of the Anglican Church were allowed to attend university. Falmouth was a suitable place to launch the career of the man who would play so important a role in the development of the United States Navy. Its climate was one of the most temperate in England. Its protected inland harbor, one of the largest in the world. Young Josiah, seen here at age 15 in a portrait on a brooch, was apprenticed at 18 to the master constructor of His Majesty's Dockyard at Plymouth. Later, he worked as a shipwright at Plymouth and at the Royal Dockyards in London. Josiah knew the sea, sailing often with his brother Henry, who was captain of the Crown, a merchant ship owned by their cousins, the G.C. Fox Company of Falmouth. The firm is still in business today as shipping and travel agents. Sailing with Henry, Josiah observed the way ships performed in different sea and weather conditions, and he visited dockyards in Europe, Russia, and Britain, making sketches and notes on naval design and construction methods. In April of 1794, he would put his education to use, designing the first ships of the United States Navy. Fox had been in America 6 months, visiting friends and relatives and studying American timber, when the Secretary of War, General Henry Knox, asked him to help design and construct the 6 frigates authorized by Congress. Named an assistant to Philadelphia shipbuilder Joshua Humphreys, Fox was in fact the only formally trained person involved in the creation of the tall ships, and the only one who had observed ship performance at sea. General Knox leaned heavily on the young shipwright. Fox disagreed with some of Humphrey's ideas and submitted his own designs to the Secretary of War. And so began a controversy that has lasted to this day. Humphreys claimed sole credit for the design of all 6 frigates. Fox, in his many letters, asserted that he pioneered in this country the methods of drafting, making the molds, taking the beveling of timbers, and raising the ships. Over a century later, Assistant Navy Secretary Franklin D. Roosevelt, citing War Department letters, said that Humphreys was, quote, asked to make calculations of materials and prices, and that Fox was his, quote, assistant in drafting the original plans. It is now clear that Josiah Fox played the central role in the design of the first ships of the United States Navy. The designers made scale models, such as this one by Isaac Hull, one of the first captains of the Constitution, except that they built only half the ship, then reduced their design to drawings, adding their mirror image for the other half, and enlarging their drafts to proper size. Some 3,000 trees of many varieties were needed for each frigate. The most important was live oak, estimated 5 times harder than the white oak used for the frames of European ships. Crews were sent into the lowlands and islands of Georgia and South Carolina to harvest the oak. The wood and the work was hard. Josiah personally selected certain crooked timbers needed for each ship. Work at the shipyards was almost stopped when the United States made peace with the Dey of Algiers, paying tribute for the release of captives and the cessation of pirate attacks. But deteriorating relations with France made Congress act to authorize conclusion of the construction and to establish in 1797 a Navy Department. Within a few months, 2 44-gun frigates, the Constitution and the United States, and the 36-gun Constellation were in the water. In 1800, the last of the 6 frigates was launched. The ships of the young Navy distinguished themselves on the high seas. The Constellation was the first to score a major victory, defeating the insurgents in 1799 in the brief undeclared war with France. The Constitution added victory to victory until it became a floating legend. It led the attack on the harbor of Tripoli and the castle of the Pasha in 1804. It fought the first great battle of the War of 1812, defeating Britain's guerrilla in less than half an hour. At the height of the action, it is said, a Yankee gunner saw a British cannonball bounce off his ship's live oak planks and exclaimed, "Her sides are made of iron." Since then, the Constitution has been known as Old Ironsides. The Constitution was never defeated in battle, nor was the Constellation, now in Baltimore Harbor. On Josiah's grave, is a plaque dedicated by the United States Navy which lists his accomplishments. He served as clerk and assistant constructor, as superintendent of the Gosport Navy Yards in Norfolk, Virginia, and as Navy constructor. He designed 7 frigates, 3 revenue cutters, a schooner, 8 gunboats, a brig, and a sloop of war. Josiah became an American citizen in 1798 and served his chosen country for 15 years under 4 presidents. In 1809, Fox was relieved of his duties, apparently because of his politics. He was a Federalist, and his practice of buying slaves and freeing them. In 1811, unemployed and with a large family, Josiah Fox moved west to the Upper Ohio Valley and the growing town of Wheeling, Virginia. The area had an abundance of good timber and an available labor supply. Fox planned to build merchant ships to sail the inland waterways and trade with the West Indies. But the Embargo Act and the war with Britain curtailed trade on the high seas, and he gave up the idea. And so, in 1813, Josiah Fox purchased a 200-acre farm in Concord, now Coleraine, Ohio, and became a gentleman farmer. In 1794, he married Anna Miller of Philadelphia, a descendant of British royalty. By the time of the move west, they had 5 children and the care of 3 orphaned nieces. A 6th child was born 2 months after their arrival in Wheeling. In 1798, the Quakers disowned Josiah because he was designing ships of war. However, he was reinstated after he left government service. A number of Quaker families moved to the free lands of the Upper Ohio Valley and became farmers, and it's likely that Josiah joined others of his faith in the cause of abolition. The meeting house at Concord is no longer in use, but the one at Mount Pleasant is still the yearly gathering place for Quakers in the eastern United States. It holds 1,000 persons, with women sitting to the left of the partition, men on the right, and in the balcony. The home Josiah built on his Concord farm, now known as Quaker Acres, was made of brick and designed to scale like the one he knew as a child in Cornwall, with 5 windows on the top level, 4 on the bottom, and a porch with columns. 3 of his daughters would build homes nearby, following the same British pattern. The grounds of Josiah's home bear witness to the love of trees that characterized his life, for some that he planted stand today. The cornerstone shows the date of construction and bears the initials of Josiah's oldest son, Charles. The home, considered wealthy by early American standards, is being restored. The original fireplace with pine mantel still stands, as do the original stairs. In rooms on the upper level, the initials of Josiah and Anna's grandchildren are etched on window panes. In 1833, Fox inherited the family estates in England. The sale of these properties assured a comfortable life for him and his family. The oldest child of Anna and Josiah to survive, Elizabeth Miller Fox, married Moses Chaplin, general in the Virginia militia during the War of 1812, lawyer and the first mayor of the incorporated town of Wheeling. They had 13 children. The second daughter, Anna Appleby Fox, married Robert Curtis. They had 6 children and lived on the Annandale farm near Moundsville, West Virginia, where streets bear their names. The house they built is still in use. The third child of Anna and Josiah, Rebecca Stevens Fox, married Elijah Pickering and had 7 children. Their house in St. Clairsville, Ohio, recently restored, has a particularly beautiful Victorian doorway. The oldest son to survive, Charles James Fox, married Esther Cooper. They had 4 children and are buried in Cadiz, Ohio. The youngest daughter, Sarah Scantlebury Fox, was a Quaker like her sisters and wore the same dress and hairstyle. She married Benjamin Ellis Dungan and had 8 children. The exterior of their home has the same appearance today as when it was built. The youngest son, Francis Drake Fox, married Juliana Updegraff and had 5 children, living on the farm his father built and he inherited. Memorabilia of Josiah and Anna and their children are scattered among their descendants. Josiah's writing desk and bookcase. This 4-poster bed. A bedside table. And 2 matching tables are among the items of furniture. Josiah used this plumb bob in his work, and in this diary recorded the details of his trip to London in 1833 with 2 sons to settle the family estates. A family Bible dated 1688 was among the many items they brought back from that trip. The family name is engraved on the handle of this punch ladle. And JF 1830 is etched on this liqueur glass. This sugar bowl is made of silver. A paperweight in the form of a fox of pewter. And one of glass was made in Wheeling. A bell, perhaps used on a ship, is brass. A Chinese lacquered plate is from the 16th century. A grandfather clock was made by Seth Thomas. And this wreath was made from the hair of Josiah and Anna's grandchildren. Josiah's will is preserved in the courthouse at St. Clairsville, Ohio, written in his own hand on one large piece of parchment. It provides that any disagreements be settled not in the courts but by arbitration, as specified in the Quaker discipline. Josiah died in 1847 at the age of 84. He and his wife Anna are buried in Coleraine, Ohio, in the Quaker cemetery outside the old Concord Meeting House. Nearby are the graves of 2 of their children, 3 grandchildren, 16 great-grandchildren, and some freed slaves. Sarah Fox Dungan and her husband Benjamin are buried here, as are Francis Fox and his wife Juliana. Today, signs on both sides of Coleraine mark Josiah Fox's contribution to his chosen country. In Baltimore Harbor, the Constellation lies at anchor. One of the first frigates launched, the 36-gun ship was smaller and faster than the Constitution, and like it, was never defeated in battle. In Crane, Indiana, a stand of white oak was set aside in 1976, dedicated to the replanking of the Constitution, a task necessary every 40 years. And in Boston, the National Park Service maintains Old Ironsides herself, across the harbor from where she was built, and next to the dry docks used for repair. In the nearby museum, visitors can see some of her original fittings, including original wood, and her fighting top from which marksmen fired on enemy sailors. At the Peabody Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, other parts are preserved, including a block and tackle, an early head, this one without a figure, and one of the smaller cannon called a carronade. But most of all, they can tour the ship herself. Imagine themselves on her decks in Tripoli, or in action during 1812 against the Guerriere, and feel the sense of pride of those early sailors, and they can see for themselves the graceful lines and sturdy construction of Old Ironside, and appreciate the genius of the young shipwright from England who adopted America and played a critical role in designing and building the ships of her first navy, Josiah Fox.